Hi, I'm Raj Roy. I'm the Celeste Bartos Chief Curator of the Department of Film at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I lead a group of 25 individuals. We are one of 7 departments at the museum focusing on different media-specific areas, and it's a pleasure to lead a department that's been focusing on cinema for the last 75 years. When Alfred Barr, the original founding director of the Museum of Modern Art, conceived of the different departments that would make up the curatorial structure of the museum, cinema was always part of that voice. He really felt that it was one of the essential art forms of the 20th century. 75 years ago, actually 2010 is the 75th anniversary of the Department of Film. The circulating film library was opened, allowing films to circulate to different areas of the country, focusing on the repertory tradition of cinema, showing films that weren't first release, but creating a history of the cinema. So in a way, MoMA has always been there at the origins of talking about how cinema has inspired not only other filmmakers, but artists in general. But at MoMA, you have a unique opportunity to have multiple formats, different types of artists all working under one roof. So you have painters in dialogue with filmmakers, you have illustrators in dialogue with performance artists now. And as we move into the 21st century, I think what you'll see is more of the arts overlapping. And in a way, the Tim Burton exhibition is the perfect example of that. With the origins of the department and the museum, film was collected out of urgency and necessity, where the studios were actually throwing away prints because there was no tradition of repertory cinema, or certainly no home video at that point. In a way, MoMA was saving cinema from being destroyed. Now, of course, we can be more selective because there are international archives. So when a film enters the MoMA collection, it's actually considered equal to a painting or a sculpture entering the permanent collection. Our primary mission in the Department of Film is theatrical cinematic exhibitions, so retrospectives of individual filmmakers, thematic exhibitions around certain genres or certain periods of filmmaking. We ventured also from time to time into gallery-based film exhibitions. We do have lobby space in the cinema area at MoMA, which has always been programmed with ephemera from films, posters, papers, and then as we moved into the 21st century, beginning with the Pixar exhibition, we started to expand outside of the actual cinema area into the larger gallery space at MoMA. The Tim Burton exhibition is, in a way, is a culmination of many years of work of taking the cinema off the screen and putting it out on the walls into the galleries, and it's been a thrill to see how successful that's been. The great thing about cinema is that everyone has a point of entry. I think it's a great blessing that audiences around the world have a familiarity with the moving image that gives us a way into their world and into their homes in many cases. So what we're doing when we're translating the moving image to a gallery exhibition is first saying, you know this material, so come share it with us. And I couldn't think of a more generous artist than Tim, who's actually willing to share his entire thought process with an audience. So what you're seeing in his exhibition is not only the end result of many years of work on a particular film, but the years and years of thought and exercise that has gone into creating those worlds and creating that vision. Perhaps that's it, really, is creating a window onto the process of what it takes to make a film. There will be a continuing tradition of creating gallery exhibitions based around film artists, but we'll never forget or abandon the idea that the best way to experience the movies is in the cinema. And that's something, in a way, that we take very seriously, is preserving the cinematic experience, seeing film as film. And of course, as we move forward into the future, experiencing digitally born works in the way that they were intended. As a repository for film history, it's essential that we are showing our audiences what the artist intended. So whether it's film as film, whether it's a silent film with music accompaniment, our mission is to give that artist's intent the proper treatment. After the very positive results of working with Pixar on creating an exhibition based on their film art, Ron Magliozzi and Jenny He had the idea to kind of focus in on a specific artist, and Tim was the obvious choice for them. When I joined the team a few years later, we started investigating what there was actually available to us to create this exhibition, and that's when the treasure trove of Tim's drawings and paintings and personal work was unveiled to us. And you really couldn't imagine a bigger shock or surprise for a curator to find that an artist himself had archived his own history. and done so thoughtfully and so thoroughly. The hardest element of putting the show together was making the choices, how to go from 10,000 drawings down to 700. I think what audiences will find is that they're able to be immersed in Tim's world, truly. It's not any specific drawing, it's not any specific painting or any specific element from a film. It's the totality. It's being immersed truly in what it takes to be a visionary like Tim. Well, honestly, my favorite part of the exhibition is watching the audience interact with Tim when they get the joke, when they see the cartoon and the smile comes across their face as they realize the insight that Tim is providing them into his own world. That's the generosity of the artist, is to expose himself to a public that is loving. I mean, he has millions of fans around the world, but this is still intensely personal material, and it's a treat to see people discover that. To see the outpouring of visitors, to see the lines forming and people planning their vacations in advance was really phenomenal, not only for MoMA, but specifically for the film department, because it was the first time that we had reached out on such a broad scale, and to see the film audience, to see the cinema lovers packing the galleries and the halls of MoMA, not only for Tim's show, but filtering into other elements of the museum, it really embodies the MoMA spirit. So where you could have people enjoying cinema as well as painting and sculpture and drawings and photography. Tim allowed that to be possible and to bring in hundreds of thousands of people that had really never been exposed to that. The great thing about coming to Australia was knowing that we would be in a place that was cinema-centric. Being at Acme was in a way like coming home. There was a lot of pressure at MoMA because it is a multi-media venue where there are different types of audiences. So there was always the risk that certain audiences wouldn't embrace Tim's show. In the end, that wasn't the case. It was kind of universally embraced by all types of audiences. But coming here, it did feel like a warm embrace, where people understood cinema. They understood the idea of a film artist as being a multifaceted individual who can express himself not only on with the moving image, but also on paper and through a creative process that isn't a straight line, which a lot of people, I think, in the art world think that genius comes from the brain and goes right out the arm and through the pen or the paintbrush. So bringing Tim's show from the intense art world setting of Manhattan to Acme, to bring it to a cinematheque, to bring it to audiences that understand film and filmmakers, it felt perfect. Probably the biggest difference between the MoMA version of the show and the one that's here in Melbourne is the fact that there are film clips throughout the gallery. At MoMA, we didn't really have any film images other than Hansel and Gretel in the gallery setting. And it does make sense here to have that opportunity to see the film right next to the material that was either inspired by it or was the inspiration for it, because it is a cinematheque and because we are talking film first here. At MoMA, we almost felt we had to take a step back and kind of introduce the idea of a creative process with a filmmaker to an audience. We also have the luxury of space here at Acme that we didn't have at MoMA. So we have about a third again as much space. So it does feel like there's a lot more room to breathe. And hopefully the conversations that come out of having the juxtaposition of the film clips and the work on paper leads in different directions than it did in New York. The thing I love is that you can have the balance where you're reaching out to real film aficionados who know Tim's work, but are perhaps looking to take it to another level. So we have the Influences series, films that were inspiring to Tim for the people that want to enrich their experience, but also reaching out to school groups and young kids who will be inspired by Tim. I think if you can have both and maintain that balance, that's always the best course. I just hope that the show can inspire as many audiences as here in Melbourne as it did in New York, and that Tim's generosity is felt. I really hope that come 20 or 30 years we can open a show from someone who came to see Tim's exhibition here in Melbourne and were inspired and went out and followed their vision and created great work based on that. That would be the best outcome for this show.